Good afternoon. I'm Muriel Bowser. I'm the mayor of Washington, D.C. We are on Wayne Place in Ward 8 in Washington, D.C. To provide an update on our investigation into human remains located near the vicinity of where we stand. I'm joined by the Chief of Police, Peter Newsham, the district's Chief Medical Examiner, Roger Mitchell, the district's Director of Forensic Sciences, Dr. Jennifer Smith, the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety, Kevin Donahue. We're also joined by the council member for this award. We are just here to let everyone know that we take very seriously this investigation and getting information out to this community just as soon as we are able. I wanted the chief to be able to provide an update on the police investigation and Dr. Mitchell to provide an update on his office's work on identifying the remains here and letting the public know how we can find out what happened to these individuals. Chief Newsham.
Thanks, Mayor Bowser. And I want to start off by saying I wish we had more information than we do about this case at this point. So last Wednesday around 3:30, a little past 3:30 in the afternoon, officers were called to the scene. We had some workers at the property who had discovered some bones that they believed to be human. The Office of the Chief Medical Examiner was called and was subsequently able to determined that the bones were human and apparently female. We had cadaver dogs that were called to the scene. We also discovered a shallow grave not too far from this property. In that shallow graves were the skeletal remains of 2 additional adult females. And at this point, we don't have them identified. The identification process, which will be a combination of work between the Department of Forensic Sciences, the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner's office, and my homicide detectives. We will work to try and piece together exactly who these folks are. Part of that investigation will include searching through our missing persons reports to see if any of the deceased in this case are some of our missing persons that have been previously reported. So to talk about the anthropological work and the forensic work, I'm going to ask Dr. Mitchell to come up and say a couple of words.
Thank you, Chief Newsham, Mayor. We have an in-house forensic anthropologist that works for the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, Dr. Love. What we've done so far is, as of today, we are cleaning and reconstructing the skeletal remains of each individual. The shallow grave that just spoke about, those skeletal remains were commingled, so it required us to make sure that we sorted those out completely. Our next order of business is to pull together a biometrical profile that would be trying to identify age, ancestry, as well as stature of these skeletal remains. There are a series of information that goes into that. And so that's what we'll be doing over the next several weeks to try to provide information to law enforcement and our forensic scientists partners. Cause and manner of death is still outstanding. We still are looking for injury or disease on the skeletal remains to be able to establish cause and manner of death. I am the forensic pathologist on these cases. Whenever there's an anthropological evaluation, there is a forensic pathologist involved as well. So we have some time that we have to take in order to get this right. So I ask the public to bear with us as we try to identify these women. Thank you.
Questions, Chief? Any questions for the
You guys
chief?
have any questions?
Or the doctor?
Medical examiner, you say that the remains of the 2 females in the shallow grave were commingled. What do you mean by that?
That means that it appears as though there wasn't much dirt in between those 2 skeletal remains, and so some of the skeleton fell and was with the other skeleton. So it's important for us to make sure that we have everyone restructured properly.
So So like one
Any
on
way
top
of
of the other?
gauging how long those remains were there? Can you look at them and say this is the degree of decomposition, so it must have been this amount of time?
It really becomes very difficult when they're already skeletonized. We don't have any soft tissue parts to be able to say exactly how long. We are looking at the scene as well as looking at the information that we gather from the skeletal remains to see how best we can identify time frame since death, but that's going to take some time.
How long it takes to get to that
Hold
point?
on 1 second. I'll get to you in 1 second.
How long does it take to get to that point of skeletal degeneration? Do we have a gauge on that from living human being to that point?
Yes, so it really depends on what season outside, what season of the year. At the very least a year, and then once you're beyond a year, it's very difficult to gauge.
Doctor, can you tell us if you have been able to recover any usable DNA from any of the remains so far, just whether or not there is actually, and they're in good enough shape that there is actual DNA for you to work with?
Absolutely. There's no doubt that if we get to a place where we have either a family or we have a individual to do DNA comparison, I'm quite certain that we have DNA that we would be able to compare with.
Were there any items found at all, clothes, buttons, belt buckles, things that you might find in a grave of any kind?
Because it's an open investigation, we're not going to provide that level of detail today. But if and when that becomes available, we'll share that information.
Did any of the remains appear to have any damage to them, any kind of trauma, and how were you able to determine that they're female remains?
So the first question that you asked, because it's an open investigation, we're not going to share any trauma or any injury or disease to the bones at this point. As far as female, the female pelvis is very distinctive to the male pelvis, and we have pelvis bones from all three skeletal remains.
Chief, are you confident that this is the end of the trail for possible remains? I know you guys may have been searching around more today, but are you sure that at this site you found everything?
You know, we're going to stay here for as long as it takes to make sure we do a thorough examination of the property. It's concerning to find three bodies that are this close, geographically close together.
Chief, are you considering these all three cases homicides, even though the medical examiner says they doesn't have a cause in mind?
It's an undetermined death investigation at this point, but our homicide detectives will normally take a case like this. The circumstances certainly rise to the level of suspicious, so we're going to have our homicide unit investigating this case.
And there's a program, web-based program called Anonymous. Are you using that?
We're going to use all the investigative techniques that we have available to us. I mean, I know this is very disconcerting to the community here to have these remains found in their neighborhood, and we want to get to the answers as quickly as we can. And I know that Dr. Mitchell and Dr. Smith want to get to the bottom of this just as much as all of you do. So we're going to do everything we can to get this done as quickly as we can. I think understanding the circumstances that we have here, we have very dated skeletal remains. It's probably going to take a bit of time before we can figure out exactly who these remains belong to.
Chief, have you ruled out the possibility that this was a cemetery or a graveyard and these remains were actually supposed to be here and maybe nothing nefarious happened?
It's so early in the investigation we can't rule out anything, so we're going to have to look at all possibilities.
You said from the bones you could tell that it's a female. Can you tell if it's an adolescent or a teenager or an older victim?
That's the work that we're doing right now when we talk about getting that biometric. There's measurements that need to be taken of the bones in order to give us age. We're definitely not dealing with infants, so we know that. So that's important. So that's where we're going now. We have to do additional measurements and analysis to give us an age range that we can rely on.
Hold on, excuse me, Mark. Wait.
I'm sorry, question for the chief. Was there anything that led investigators to that second discovery, or was that just through random sweep?
We had cadaver dogs here from the D.C. Fire and EMS and from the Fairfax County Police Department, and the dogs alerted in that area.
Chief, could you tell us about the history of this building and perhaps the large number of past tenants and the large numbers of people that it's likely your detectives are going to have to go through
just to establish residency. Maybe I'm mischaracterizing that. How would you describe all of that?
No, absolutely. That's one of the things we're going to have to do, identify, and you know, to the extent that people will cooperate, we will certainly appreciate it, and I think folks will, because they understand the seriousness of this. So if folks are out there and they're listening and they have lived in this building, if they come forward, it's going to make our work a lot easier, so we would appreciate that. But certainly we're going to go through all the tenant records, see who lived in the building, see who currently lives in the building. People who frequently visited the building, even perhaps deliveries to the building. We'll have to look. Well, every possibility we're going to have to look at.
I know it was built in 1948. That's a lot of people.
It could very well be. And then, you know, once we get the remains identified, it may lead us in a completely different direction. So all we're doing right now is speculating.
Question for Dr. Mitchell. You said it's difficult to ascertain how long the remains have been there, but do you have any idea of whether there's a difference in time between the different remains? Do they seem to be roughly in the same shape in terms of their age that they've been lying there?
Yeah, they do seem to be in about the same shape. The bones look like the skeletal remains look like they're in the same shape as the ones found in the two different locations. Yes.
So I want to thank you for that update, and as I mentioned earlier, we certainly share the devastation that this community must feel, especially not having these women identified, and we're going to work very hard to find out who they are and why they were found in this circumstance. Thank you very much.
Could you comment on the 5D officer who was arrested in Prince George's County?
We had a police officer that was arrested and charged with a sexual assault in the county.
I mean,
early this morning.
And can you tell us his status, how long he's been on the department, and what your general thoughts are on
He came on the department in 2016, I believe, if my memory serves me correctly, and he will immediately be placed on non-contact status.
Your thoughts on it? Do you want to weigh in just personally?
You know, whenever you hear something like this involving one of our officers, it's very disturbing. You know, and you don't want to hear about stuff like that involving our police officers. So we're going to let the criminal justice system play out, and we'll do whatever we need to do internally as far as our investigation.
Thanks, Chief.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.